I've been planning out this video for a while, but because of how complex Nagito Hajime is, I felt so unprepared to talk about him until I played the game a second time, so that's what I did. Because to be honest, after my first playthrough, I did not understand Nagito at all. I understood there were layers to this guy, and I couldn't just write him off as another typical crazy character in a series like this, but I couldn't really wrap my head around his mentality. Killing for the sake of hope? Some of his actions felt downright cruel, crazy, hypocritical, paradoxical to what he claimed to believe in. He honestly made me mad at times, and I feel like a lot of people relate to this. You either hated him after the reveal, or were intrigued by his unhinged side and grew to love him more. A character this beloved and complex needed to have a video that's well planned in advance, since he's so layered. Honestly, what started as a video about just Nagito's relationship with Hajime has spiraled out of control into a long-winded summary of 𝔫𝔦𝔱𝔢𝔬𝔰𝔱𝔢𝔯, a psychoanalysis, how his character fits into a fall arc, cognitive dissonance, hope, despair, and a little bit of shipping bias sprinkled in. I don't know how this happened, but if you're ready, pop some popcorn and let's get started. The relationship between Nagito and Hajime, and why it matters, not just as a ship, but as an essential part of the narrative, and to Nagito's character as a whole. Nagito Hajime is the ultimate lucky student, which proves to be a curse at times. As he tells Hajime during his free time events, his life is always extreme after extreme. When he was young, the plane he was flying on was hijacked and then attacked by meteors that killed his parents. This is followed by what he claims is good luck, of inheriting his parents' inheritance, which is assumed to be a lot. Then he gets kidnapped and finds a lottery ticket worth $300 million. Saying this is messed up is an understatement. The reason Nagito is able to be so nonchalant during the killing game is because he genuinely believes there will be equally good luck that will occur soon after, as proven by his past. By this train of logic, it makes sense as to why he acts so optimistic compared to everyone else. Now, I'm not condoning his actions, but it is important to realize when writing morally gray characters that they are often complex because of their talented worldview. This worldview influences their mindset, which reinforces their thought process, then their behavior, which therefore influences their actions. Think of worldview as the lens in which you view, well, the world. This lens subconsciously makes you decide your opinions on certain topics, often due to biases from past experiences or even logical fallacies you don't realize you have. For example, if you were raised in a collectivist culture, you are more likely to put the needs of the group above your own, which may influence your behavior on certain deeds you perform on a daily basis. Say, being more collaborative with people you don't know versus someone raised in an individualist culture. The reason I chose this example is because the game is set in Japan, which is a collectivist culture, and you can see how this affects Nagito's behavior to some degree. On paper this might sound obvious, but if you really think about your own worldview and beliefs and analyze them, you might find they're not as sound as you thought, and you might have some hidden biases in there. For Nagito, his worldview is that hope and talent is everything to him. Hope represents absolute good, as he believes that is what has kept him alive this whole time. His complete devotion to hope is what he believes he can justify the means for any actions, including murder. This worldview actually ties into a fascinating narrative that Nagito's character follows, known as the fall arc. Put simply, the fall arc is when a character repeatedly clings to a lie or damaging worldview that leads to their downfall. In Nagito's case, he clings onto his unyielding belief in hope and talent to the point it becomes detrimental and corrupt. It's in a dark reflection of Makoto Naegi. He rejects the truth, this being that the world is unpredictable and that he's not to blame for people close to him dying around him, because accepting such a narrative means that he has nothing to believe in and must face the likely event that he will die alone. Put a pin in this topic, we'll come back to it later. Now, it's because of this life of misfortune that he develops stage 3 malignant lymphoma and frontotemporal dementia before getting accepted into Hope's Peak. And again, I am not saying that having a crippling mental or physical illness justifies the crazy things Nagito does, but do keep this in mind. If you grew up with his evidence of bad things happening to you and with no good influence in your life, it would be crazier if you weren't a little messed up in the head. It also makes sense that you'd internalize a belief that is such a core part of Nagito's character, so obvious that it's almost annoying. And that core trait is his constant self-deprecation. I don't believe that he puts himself down to gain pity or attention from people despite being extremely lonely. He genuinely believes the trash that he tells himself. And while this is understandably off-putting for the average person and Ultimate alike, you have to remember that this guy worships hope and talent, as those are the two things that have ruled his worldview for so long, and the Ultimates represent just that to him. They are gods to him. If you knew you were about to die, it does make sense that you'd want to devote yourself to your cause as much as you could, which leads to destroying the gym by bombing it and straight up carrying a gun around with him, which there is more context to blowing up the gym. Basically, this was after the events of Twilight Syndrome murder case, so everyone's sad and he wants to postpone the exam for them, which, sweet thought in theory, but it escalates quickly. I think in general Nagito is more mentally stable in the anime than in the game, since this is before the obvious stress of despair taking over and before his health starts deteriorating. He cares for his classmates and is surprisingly demure, though is still misguided. Now, do I think he and Hajime would have realistically been friends if they had met? Probably not. I think they both would have been jealous of each other at the very least, and at worst absolutely hated each other. I mean, this is Hajime at his most insecure we're talking here. Literally giving his body up for experimentation because he thinks he's worthless without talent. Imagine how much faster he would have chosen this if Nagito were there with his misguided speeches about hope and a small dog can never be a big dog and we're stepping stones. Like, I love Nagito, but those two would not work out at this point in time. Right person, wrong time moment. However, you could make a case for this being possible considering Hajime was able to somewhat get along with Fuyuhiko's sister, so On to Nagito's relationship with Izuru. So Izuru Kamakura is the ultimate hope, as in he has every talent in existence and represents hope, so you can guess how this affects their dynamic. He gets shot by the guy and blushes. He's hopeless, Your Honor. I think we can assume that this is when he sees Izuru as the ultimate hope, a being that is like a god to him that reinforces all he believes in. When Nagito first gets brainwashed by Junko's despair, you see that he genuinely cares and grieves for Chiaki, but then the brainwashing gets to him and he's so overcome with despair that he internally justifies it as her being a stepping stone for hope, as he's latching onto his beliefs as a desperate attempt to remain himself as he's turning into the thing he hated. I thought that was interesting, as this just so happens to be another step in the fall arc, when the character completely rejects the truth and falls deeper and deeper and does more questionable things as a result. His sense of worldview is so tainted by despair that he faces a sense of cognitive dissonance for the first time. Cognitive dissonance is when you have two conflicting beliefs and the anxiety that arises from that. Usually, people want their actions to be consistent with their beliefs, but this is the first time this doesn't happen, which absolutely breaks him. Again, Nagito does care about his classmates, but I believe this is the point where his perception of hope becomes twisted, and this paradoxical belief that he's now known for. Nagito and Izuru's relationship is somewhat implied during Ultra Despair Girls, where Nagito becomes servant. Ignoring his rather kinky outfit choice, he does say he has someone he's meeting up with, and the epilogue then shows Izuru. You don't have to watch my Hajime Izuru video to understand this part, but if you have to know something about Izuru, it's this. Izuru is the result of the experimentation on the body of Hajime Hinata, the character you play in Danganronpa 2, so they are the same person but different characters. Due to having his feelings surgically removed, he presents himself as apathetic and is bored all the time since he is the master of everything. The only reason he's even with Junko is because she just happened to approach him first and he needed an out from being experimented on. Anyway, this guy is the culmination of all talent and hope, so Nagito worships the crap out of him, and I'm not even kidding. The ending song to the anime is literally his voice actor singing from his POV about how awesome Izuru is and how badly he wants Izuru to rail him. That escalated quickly. Now you might think that Izuru doesn't give a crap about anyone, so why would Nagito be any different? And it's here where I really wish Ultra Despair Girls was about Izuru instead of Komaru and Toko, but whatever. We gotta use our heads a little. Personally, I think Izuru would be interested in Nagito purely because of how naturally unpredictable he is as a person combined with his luck. While Izuru's luck overpowers Nagito's, this could actually be a good thing, as it could quell the former's fears about everyone he loves dying because of his luck, which is actually really nice. It's an interesting dynamic where Izuru is stoic and calculating, and Nagito is this wild card, the literal embodiment of luck. Nagito's talent is already unpredictable, even when it's overpowered by Izuru's luck. Since his personality is so all over the place, I can guarantee that Izuru would definitely not get bored being around him. If you want to get fancy, maybe Nagito even teaches him a thing or two about human emotion. Considering how Izuru is mistreated or used by practically everyone in his short life, he could find solace in Nagito for accepting him as he is without wanting anything in return, even if that does come from a place of worship in a power dynamic way. Maybe he'd grow to recognize despair as being boring, as it manifests as disempowerment, depression, avoidance, forcing yourself to be stuck in a cycle out of fear of change, while hope is more unpredictable. It's open-minded, freeing, it opens the door to different opportunities. And who better to show Izuru this than the hope lover himself? Nagito's role in Ultra Despair Girls is a little confusing, as is his nature in any game. This takes place after the first game, but before Danganronpa 2, so Junko is dead by this point. Due to being corrupted by despair, he cuts off his arm and attaches Junko's arm to it, which, yeah, he has a rather complex relationship with Junko in this game, which in a way mirrors his own internal conflict of cognitive dissonance. His mind is pulling him in two different directions of hope and despair, shown in a scene where Monika calls him out on his contradictory belief of hope and how he's able to even feel it still, which he just smiles about. But not only that, there's also a sense of dissonance shown in his interaction with Komaru. This feels like pretty intentional foreshadowing to Hajime, as Hajime is also a normal guy. His goal throughout Ultra Despair Girls is to cause a war between hope and despair and see hope come out on top, right when it seems hopeless. For this reason, he becomes a servant of the kids, joins with Monika Toa, and even guides Komaru. I have a mini theory myself that the narrator in Ultra Despair Girls is actually Nagito because the character voice matches really well, but it's just a theory. I mean, he does mess around with the settings on her megaphone, so it makes sense he'd teach the players controls. Now, the cognitive dissonance he faces with Komaru is something that is brought up again and again, and that is whether he likes it or not, he feels a sense of relatability to Komaru, and later Hajime for being like him, while he claims to be a stepping stone, worthless. He goes on this rant about how most of society are normies, but undeniably hope belongs to the side of the weak because society loves underdogs. But see, this goes against his beliefs. He sees hope and talent as one and the same, so he tries to push this away, but the conflict is still there, and will continue to be brought up.
There are two kinds of people in this world. Those who are born with worth, and everybody else, no matter how hard or low you see the chance. They will never be the same as someone who was born worthy. They see that effort brings success. That's the complete lie. The world is not that kind of game. No matter how hard it's small down track, it will never become a large star.
Oh, why does he have to be like this? Soon after, the remnants are captured by Makoto Naegi and taken into the Neo World program for rehabilitation. While on their way, their memories are reset, so by this time, when Nagito talks to Izuru in episode 0, they don't remember each other. Nagito admires Izuru, and Izuru is indifferent. The usual. He's disappointed that Izuru won't be able to participate in what lies ahead, as he'll revert back to his original form as Hajime Hinata. As for Izuru's motive here, it's really interesting to see that his motive is really not that different from Nagito's, in the sense that they both want to see hope and despair clash. However, for Izuru, he wants to see which one is more entertaining, while Nagito is more biased towards hope and just wants to see them go at it. Izuru inserts Junko into the program to test this theory. However, this isn't necessarily for malicious reasons. Deep down, I think he did it because he wanted to get Chiaki another chance at life, but again, that's just my interpretation of it. As predicted, when the program starts, Izuru reverts back to Hajime, who he believes has a talent but has simply forgotten what it is. Even in the events of Danganronpa 2, Nagito is drawn to him, even though he has no reason to be. You'd think even less, given he's the only one who's quote-unquote forgotten his talent. However, Nagito's the first one you as the player meet when you start the game, in the iconic jump scare moment, and even act as the protagonist's partner for most of Chapter 1. When Hajime questions if his talent is worthless, Nagito believes that he does have a talent that will be full of hope, which is, sad. It's noted by Hajime that Nagito is eerily calm and cheerful no matter the situation, even early on, contrasted by Hajime's sense of skepticism and realist mentality. His hope speeches don't make much sense at the time, but they're dismissed as being silly or cheesy as opposed to what happens later. Nagito resolves to be the first to commit a murder so he can, say it with me, use as a stepping stone for hope. He truly believes in his classmates and in his mind doesn't mean any harm and even cares for them, but he's so far gone that he's even more socially inappropriate than he was before. Then the reveal happens, and understandably Hajime is betrayed and weirded out. Notice how in this scene and every scene where Nagito goes a little crazy with his hope speeches, that his eyes are the same swirls of despair as when he's brainwashed. It is the only character who displays this. At this point, everyone pretty much hates the guy. Hajime starts to distance himself from Nagito, which you can tell hurts him, but he pushes his feelings to the side to focus on his true goal, or what he thinks is his true goal, which is hope, obviously. Nagito puts hope above all else, and according to his hope fragment interaction, hope is absolute good to him. He goes on another rant about hope, which results in him being tied up. And then Hajime goes to feed him, discovers him tied up, and this definitely doesn't awaken anything in him, no siree. Now at this point in the game, you may be asking, is Nagito meant to be the protagonist's partner, or does rival suit him better? Or is he an antagonist, or a love interest? And honestly, it's really hard to tell sometimes. His role in the game is so all over the place that he doesn't really fit into either category neatly like the previous characters in these roles. He's not a cookie-cutter rival character like Byakuya was, nor a simple crazy person like Genocide Jack is. He's such a wild card in the game that even Monokuma is caught off guard by his actions. We can tell that Hajime doesn't truly hate Nagito, much to his annoyance. He finds himself drawn to him just as much. He's in major denial here. We know about Nagito's eventual conflicted feelings towards Hajime in Chapter 4, but Hajime has some as well. This was his friend, after all. I think deep down Hajime has this need to understand everyone, but he's also a logical person, and a lot of Nagito's actions and words don't make sense in his mind, so it scares him off. But even without realizing it, he gives Nagito way more of a chance than anyone else does. Why does he care so much about this guy's safety when Nagito only makes his life more complicated, gives him some complicated feelings, and even endangers his classmates? Gee, I wonder. Hajime even admits at one point that Nagito is at the very least not boring to be around. I see you, Hajime. Despite his talent, Nagito is rather optimistic, laid back, and an overall pretty honest person. He's loving to those he cares about, so Hajime, basically. I mean, the guy says this, and you have to remember that he has frontotemporal dementia, and a large component of this is social awkwardness. He often says offensive things without meaning to, or can't tell when people are being sarcastic, or can't tell when he's making people uncomfortable. The way he enthusiastically talks about his messed up backstory being overshadowed by an even bigger hope would be a good example of this. But in his own way, he goes out of his way to help and care for Hajime, such as gathering the 4 girls from Twilight Syndrome murder case and having him watch the movie in Chapter 3 to clear him of doubt. It's very telling that a lot of his paradoxical nature stems back to Hajime, not even counting the cognitive dissonance we'll get into in Chapter 4, by the way. He claims he doesn't care what others think of him, yet is shown to be upset in his character portraits when Hajime is upset with him. He says he doesn't mind to be a sacrifice, yet says that all he wants is someone's love. To Hajime, mind you. He never says any backstory stuff to anyone else, just Hajime. And despite his immense respect and love of the Ultimates around him, he seems to not really care about them personally, like at all, or even ask them anything about themselves. Oh, except for Hajime. We can't not talk about when Nagito had the liar disease. He's basically confessing his love. His affection towards Hajime is pretty obvious early on. I'm mostly pointing it out when he eventually turns on everyone, as it's made pretty clear that the liar disease makes you say the opposite of what you wholeheartedly believe. I mean, yeah, he admires Hajime in the same way he admires everyone else with talent, but at the same time, no, it's different. He actually got to know Hajime, and Hajime is the only one who really tolerates him past Chapter 1. He has more reason to like the guy than just choosing to hope that he has a cool talent. It's the fact that they're similar. Nagito claims it's because they're both stepping stones, miserable bystanders watching talent, but he's intrigued by Hajime's anger about this sentiment and his ambition to become something greater. Maybe it's because it's something he wishes he had himself. I also want to point out after Mikan's trial why Nagito was so mad at her specifically. You might be thinking his sentiment is wildly hypocritical given that both him and Mikan are very self-victimizing, but that's literally it. Nagito hates Mikan for giving in to despair and killing the name of it, yeah, but she reminds him so much of himself, which is practically second on his list of who he hates most. I feel like this also draws a fundamental distinction between the two. Mikan resents people's unfairness towards her, believing it's undeserved, while Nagito embraces it. Nagito shows more hostility towards her during the class trial compared to previous culprits, because in his mind those culprits killed for the sake of their hopes, and even continued slandering her afterwards. Mikan claims she killed out of love, which is something he could never understand because he has no one to love. Dang. This is one of the few times Nagito is rendered speechless and you get a glimpse of his true subconscious emotions. The only other times Nagito is truly taken off guard and vulnerable in this portrait is when he's with Hajime, so choosing to show him like this was an intentional choice. This hurt him deeply. Going back to his conversation with Hajime, if you get his hope fragments, he says that now that he is terminally ill, he realizes how alone he is and how much he really just wants someone's love. This is his real want, his real desire, fixation, whatever. It's called different things in writing, but this is his real one. The subconscious truth he pushes down, that once again goes against his beliefs, that he's trash and that people will die if they're close to him thanks to his luck. He even recognizes that his deteriorating mental state and health leads to self-righteous actions that push people away, which just eats at his self-esteem more. The deep subconscious truth is that he's lonely. He has no one to love, and vice versa. He probably can't even think of anyone who would attend his funeral, or even realize that he's gone. It's really sad. To reiterate, for all the crazy things he doesn't do it for attention. He genuinely believes that what he's doing is right, because that's all he's ever had. Hope is the only thing that is keeping himself sane, so to speak. It's the only logical reason he can think of for him deserving or even being alive while everyone he loves has died. So even though he's lonely, he's scared, and the rare times Hajime does want to get closer to him. So when you get his final hope fragment, he claims that what he said was a lie to make Hajime mad and gain his sympathy in hopes of keeping him alive from his luck cycle. He even offers to set up the perfect crime so Hajime alone can kill him and escape, which is him trying to be sweet in his own way, even if it's morbid. However, much like all of his other attempts at stealing Hajime's heart, his intentions don't come through and Hajime is scared off. On to the dreaded Chapter Quattro. After Nagito plays some Russian roulette on the highest difficulty and gains access to everyone's profiles and learns about the tragedy, he learns that Hajime never had a talent and was part of the reserve course, which he tells him later, absolutely crushing his spirits. Past this point, his character takes a more antagonistic turn and far less self-victimizing. When I first played the game, I wondered, why is he suddenly being such a dick to Hajime? The same guy he said this to. Well, he learns about the tragedy, he knows that his beloved ultimates fell to despair, including himself, meaning that by Nagito's logic, he's lost all faith in them, and now wants to form an unsolvable murder where all the remnants die and the trio goes free. Now, this is my biased interpretation here, but I like to think that unlike the others, Nagito doesn't genuinely hate Hajime here, and is both A, projecting heavily, and B, trying to look away from his cognitive dissonance he feels whenever he's around Hajime. Just like with Komaru, Nagito recognizes the normalcy of Hajime and how badly he wants to be acknowledged by talent. He gets Hajime's frustration, wanting to be someone, because that's who he used to be before accepting he was worthless. As perhaps this was a concept made as a coping mechanism, he doesn't understand why he cares so much for Hajime even while wanting him dead, which makes me think it's because they're so similar it disturbs him. His anger with Hajime is just an extension of anger towards himself. If this worthless reserve corps student can be so well loved by his classmates, why can't he, one with talent? Why does Hajime still struggle in wanting talent instead of accepting his place alongside him? It's incongruent with his plans, his overall feelings towards the reserve corps, and his philosophy about talent and hope. Yet Hajime is the unknown variable that throws off this equation. He always has been. They both can't help but be intrigued by each other, even while trying to push the other away or even when genuinely mad at one another. To call their relationship just plain rivalry would be injustice. And even at times it doesn't feel like a rivalry. If Nagito really hated Hajime, why would he say this? Admiration implies deep respect and even love, but with a mix of jealousy and putting someone on a pedestal, while love is seen as more unconditional, understanding, and life-devoting. If that doesn't explain Hajime and Nagito's respective similarities towards hope and talent, I don't know what does. They both see talent as highly important concepts, Hajime arguably more so, but the way they cope with it is different. While they both had a point where they saw themselves as worthless due to their talent, Hajime struggles to cope with the fact that he's talentless and doesn't want to be without one. This insecurity leading to resentment and anger, while Nagito accepts his talent is worthless from the get-go. But the difference that makes Nagito so emotional, it's the fact that Nagito's view of hope is so tainted that even he knows it. He knows Hajime would never kill in the name of hope, not like him. He knows that what he's doing is objectively wrong. Hajime could never stoop to his level. Hajime can't reach out and save him, as getting closer will only kill him in his eyes. Hajime cannot love someone like him, and if Hajime can't love him, then who could? So with his mind made up, Nagito chooses to turn away from what he really wants, and with nothing left, to embrace the lie, the one that he created to cope with his cruel realities that eventually lead to his death. And so, the fall arc is fulfilled. The fifth trial is probably my favorite trial in any Danganronpa game, purely because of just how scarily intelligent Nagito is. With how much this guy rambles about hope and talent and luck and being worthless, and I guess Hajime sometimes, I forget how smart he is. If you go back and replay every single class trial he participates in, he is always right. Seriously, anytime you're investigating or talking to Nagito, at least half of what he says ends up being right, maybe even more so than Chiaki. This guy set up an impossible murder scenario where even if the remnants figure out his true cause of death, it wouldn't be possible for them to know who the real traitor is. The fact that when they all threw those goddamn grenades, he counted on the traitor being the one to throw the one with the poison because of his luck, and just, For how much crap he talks about himself, I really believe Nagito's smarter than all the Danganronpa protagonists. And you have to be a certain level of scarily intelligent to come up with a plan like this. Like, what the heck? But if we talk seriously about his death, it's tragic how he felt so compelled to kill himself just to take everyone down. I mean, I guess it's better than if he murdered someone like he was going to in the first trial, but it's haunting how much self-harm he did to himself just to throw everyone off so easily. He believed he was dispensable, still being so self-sacrificing even when he's lost all hope in the people he cared for. He taped his mouth shut with duct tape so no one would hear his screams of pain. And while I don't agree with his methods at all, it's tragic to see a character deteriorate like this. While investigating, we see how conflicted Hajime's thoughts are. Despite how much Nagito drove him crazy, he never expected him to actually die. To see his body up close like this, even when learning of Nagito's plan of wanting them all dead, it still hurts, implying that he at least cared for him enough for it to hurt enough to be like a second betrayal. Why does Hajime still care for him, even after all this time? Even after all Nagito has done to him and his classmates? You'd think he'd be used to it at this point. He's mad at himself for even bothering to care. He talks about what Nagito would even say to them in this situation to motivate them, which is, certainly a way to grieve, I suppose. Hajime was the closest to understanding Nagito compared to anyone else who hates him, and Hajime wants to hate him, but he can't. Now let's skip to post-canon. Is it even possible for Nagito and Hajime to reconcile what little friendship they had in a world that wasn't real? Turns out, maybe the possibility isn't too far off. In Nagito's OVA, his suicide is so traumatic that he's the only remnant left asleep. And guess who creates an Izuru-esque virtual persona to eliminate the instability? Hajime. And in this imaginary world, Nagito doesn't have a talent, yet retains all of his horrible luck. That's right, he's become one of the things he hated, something he looked down on Hajime for. Now, what's interesting about this OVA is that it completely shatters the notion about Nagito's character that we've believed for so long. And here's how. This version of Nagito, one who grew up without talent, actually despises it. I know, he doesn't even go on a hope speech. Instead, he goes on a speech about how much he really hates talent and how much happier people like him would be if nobody had talent. A sentiment he repeats a grand 4 times in this episode. He actually cares about himself to a degree to be mad about that. He's surprisingly mentally stable, if not a little socially awkward. The most shocking part of all is when he actually reassures Kazuichi that you can still be happy without talent. Dude, imagine if Hajime were watching Nagito say that. When Nagito confronts the World Destroyer, he actually shoots a gun that ends up killing himself, ironically enough, which destroys the illusionary world, and the World Destroyer gives him the context. The real Nagito denies believing that this version of him said those things, and is even embarrassed about it. That being said, I do think it's possible for this version of Nagito's belief to still live in his mind, since this is a reflection of his internal desires of a path he could have taken, which I think this belief actually makes a lot of sense. It makes him mad, jealous that Hajime and Komaru can find the courage to keep moving forward despite being talentless, something he gave up long ago. To a small degree, he may still hold on to this belief, and that possibly causes more friction in his relationship with Hajime. So when Nagito wakes up, guess who's the first one watching over him? In a parallel scene reminiscent of the Nagito jump scare, Hajime's there, waiting for him, cares enough to wait, and even makes the program to wake him up even after all they've been through. Nagito hugs Fuyuhiko and Kazuichi after dreaming of them dying, which is really sweet. He takes Hajime's hand again, but this time with a new arm to replace Junko's. The use of parallel shots here is really good. This is totally unrelated, but I think it's just so funny when the remnants take the blame for the incident during the future arc. Was Hajime just like, okay guys, get into position, stare menacingly, and put in your red contact lenses, please? Alright, let's talk about the non-canon, but may as well be canon aspects of Nagito and Hajime. The final free time event is gay as hell. He pretty much is confessing to him, and it's even gayer in the original version because he explicitly says it like a love confession but backs off out of fear. The island mode is somehow gayer. Nagito has some choice lines to Hajime, to say the least. His shot through the heart events show how he frets over conversation topics with Hajime, and how he doesn't want Hajime to hate him, which is adorable. His ending is impactful because he learns that he has hope in himself, and it also feels like he's about to confess again, but says, "Will you be my friend?" instead of boyfriend, and Hajime is actually disappointed, implying that he hoped it was a confession. I already mentioned the ending song before, being about how much he wants Izuru to rail him in lines like this that I'm embarrassed to read out loud, so I'll just put them on screen. But let's talk about his character song. His character song also refers to an ambiguous love interest, specifically a him, that he loves and wants to understand more than anything else. More than his beloved hope, even. It is the first and final section of the song, in between his usual hope preaching. These two parts cut through the noise and are his true feelings that he keeps hidden. This song is interesting because it seems contradictory on the surface, but is about Nagito's confliction when he looks at Hajime, the one he loves yet whose existence goes against everything he lives for, referenced in lines where he preaches about normies being weak and useless, yet still declares that he loves Hajime. There's also the line, "When drinking poison, will you immediately drink it or throw it away?" which out of context sounds stupid, but it implies that Nagito is observing it and trying to understand how Hajime works from a distance, perhaps out of anxiety of being rejected, or even worse, Hajime reciprocating and putting himself in danger. If you compare the message of poison next to his song about Izuru, it feels more on equal ground, which reflects their dynamics. Nagito's relationship with Izuru is more one-sided, even I have to admit that, and has a clear power imbalance with the implication that Izuru is worth more and can use him however he wants, which can be unhealthy if internalized too much, whereas his relationship with Hajime is portrayed as a confusing yet enduring love that feels more equal because, as he said before, their journeys are both similar. Now, it's not all fluffy and rainbows and healthy because it's Nagito, and both songs are borderline obsessive, but at least there's less of a power imbalance with his dynamic with Hajime. Not that I'm saying that power imbalances are always unhealthy or a bad thing, but I just want to see Nagito have some agency for once in a relationship. And as we know, he certainly is not afraid to communicate and speak his mind with Hajime, so...
Recall, an octagon is a shape with 8 sides, right? I didn't expect you to know that.
Was I when the lights came up?
On top of me.
Exactly.
Sorry, there's no way you top.
So you're saying...
Yes, I have a section for the musical. Know Thy Enemy has some choice lines, to say the least. On the surface, the song is about two rivals trying to understand each other's natures, to one-up each other, and perhaps this is how Hajime sees it. But when you read lines like these from Nagito's POV, you can't help but see things as him trying to understand Hajime from the perspective of intense yearning. Remember the line from Poison? To top it off, there's a tango between them, which is pretty explicitly a romantic/sexual code of dance, and it goes on for a while, and even ends with Hajime dramatically dropping Nagito. The choreography is stunning, it really portrays their tension so well. Ultimately, Nagito is the most complex character in all of Danganronpa, and I don't think his character would be the same without his equally complex relationship with Hajime and Izuru. You learn a lot about a person through their relationships, and this one is no different. I do believe that Nagito's feelings towards Hajime are a core part of their dynamic, and that denying it would take so much away from the overall narrative, but hey, it's not up to me how you interpret things, so whatever. If you made it this far in the video, thank you. At this point, I don't even remember what the original intent of this video was. It's kind of just spiraled into so many directions, but if you stuck around, thank you for listening. Till next time, and I hope you have a day full of hope.